we have some absolutely wonderful people here who are gonna, one of the things I love about NIWIB workshops is these people are gonna tell you the real story. Not the prettied up, oh, I had an idea one day and now I'm a billionaire story. But really, I wish I had time for them to tell you all the funny things that we were talking about before this began, like real life stories of what they did. But you've heard from me, let's hear from them. Patricia Cardello, you're first on my screen, so please introduce yourself and your company.
Hi, my name is Patricia Cardello, and I am the founder and owner of a children's publishing company. And I was awarded a Disney license in 2019, so I basically publish Disney-themed books and activity kits. Great. And I've been in business for 17 years.
Okay, Pooja, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Pooja Bavishi. I am the founder and CEO of Malai. We are an ice cream company, a South Asian-inspired ice cream company with brick and mortars in New York and DC, and we're shipping nationwide, and we're in grocery retail in the Northeast. It was a way for me to honor my cultural heritage by putting it in something really fun and accessible like ice cream. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. And Rianna, please introduce yourself.
Everyone, my name is Rianna Young. I'm the founder and CEO of Happy Hounds. We make really delicious treats, tinctures, and balms to help dogs and cats find calm and relax with CBD and other beneficial ingredients. We're found in stores, pet stores across the East Coast, and online via our website.
Okay, great. So I think one of the first things that happens is you come to a workshop like this, you look at these three women who are so accomplished and have these cool sounding businesses, and you think, wow, how did they get that way? Well, I'm sure that, as they'll tell you, it took a lot of hard work. We'll start with Pooja. You mentioned that you are sold in grocery stores and you have physical locations. I'm guessing that wasn't what you looked like when you started. Can you tell us a little bit about, what the initial vision was and how you kind of grow, what's prompted your growth over time?
Yeah, I think that the initial vision was pretty similar to where we are now. Obviously, we've had to pivot many times, but ice cream is a really interesting category because it is sold in a multitude of ways, and it is one of the only categories where there is an expectation that there is a brick and mortar. And so even though the plans changed, the iterations changed quite a bit throughout the history of Malai, kind of being omni-channel was always part of the plan. That said, I started the business pushing an ice cream cart around New York City. We would I would make ice cream in my New York City apartment, bring this free camping freezer down. I had an elevator, so I brought it down every Saturday, and I would for Excel and put it in there and sell at street fairs in Manhattan and Brooklyn. It was for me, I was really unsure whether or not the New York audience was ready for these new flavors of ice cream. I had to test a proof of concept. I had to make sure that the pricing was right. So that first summer was definitely a proof of concept summer. And I always had surveys with me wherever I sold, just to ask questions and to get customer feedback. And then you evolve from there, and you take that feedback and you pivot and you do what you need to. But where I started is very much part of the origin story and how we got to know our customers so well too.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Patricia, you mentioned that you have a deal with Disney. I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience are like, "Ooh, I would like one of those." But I'm also guessing that you didn't just show up, with a business plan on a piece of paper and knock on Disney's door. So tell us a little bit about what you needed to do to be ready for that.
Well, as I said, I opened my business 17 years ago. So I was ensconced in the publishing industry for many years before I aligned myself with Disney. But from the very beginning, I always had my sights set on Disney. I just thought the magical tales and the magic of Disney, I thought was a good combination. But that and a dollar doesn't get you on the subway, as they say. So when I was in business for quite a number of years, and I felt like I had a proven concept, I really was strategic in how I approached Disney. I aligned myself to organizations that Disney was part of. I did trade shows where Disney was we're involved in. I joined licensing groups. I slowly inched my way around, closer and closer to that inner circle of people that would be able to give me guidance. And that is exactly how you don't just all of a sudden call up Disney and say, I want to have a license. I mean, it just, even when I got the license, Publishing Weekly did an article saying, Patricia, the first question I want to ask you is, how were you able to get this? And I was trying to be naive, and I said, oh, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, Patricia, come on, let's be real. I've been in licensed publishing for 25 years. Small companies don't get these contracts. So my point is, I put work into it. And it did not just happen. But by the time it did happen, I was prepared for it. And that's the best way I can tell you. If I wasn't, it would not have worked.
That's great. And Rianna, I know your company is younger than the other two, but I know that you also have grown and changed a lot in a short period of time. So tell us a little bit about how you got started and how you've grown the business, or how you've added new products, and what's been driving that.
Yeah, so how we got started. Started with street fairs as well, and also just building a website, building social media following, and really most importantly, going to retailers and speaking to them about my products and getting on shelves. Just going up to a pet store. You never know. And calling and emailing was really important, and just following up and following through with samples and other things that they would like to see. And it kind of builds on itself. You do another event, and then, your all your weekends are booked, But it's really, I couldn't do one without the other, and they all feed into each other. And as she was saying, it's like you don't know what things are leading to until they kind of mesh together, and you're like, oh, that makes sense that I did, that show, and now I can go to that retailer in that area because I was just in their neighborhood talking to consumers that were interested.
That's great. So I think one thing that you all can see from these three women is this takes a lot of chutzpah, and it takes just a lot of persistence. Nothing happens that easily. People are going to tell you, no, you got to keep going. And to get to the level they're at, you just have to keep going. Now, I mean, one of the things that we did talk a lot about is funding. I know before, but we were talking about before the workshop started, none of you had VC funding. So tell us a little bit, and we'll go, just to mix it up, we'll go back to you, Rianna. Talk about how funding has fit into your business growth or not, and what you've been able to do and what worked for you.
Yeah, I would say the business is primarily funded by sales. When I initially got started, I was introduced to a wonderful group called Wealth, and I was able to secure a business loan with them, a nonprofit, and through their capital partners. And that has been really helpful to my business starting out. And then through that, I was able to get a grant with the state about a year later. And then I just recently won a pitch competition in November, that helped me secure some funding that was really, really helpful. And, but sales have been the number one driver of my business.
And it's not, sales is your best funding source for all businesses, so keep that in mind. Patricia, I saw your light go off, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how funding has worked in your business growth?
Well, I basically self-funded my business for many years. I bootstrapped it for many years. Prior to Disney, I pretty much bootstrapped it. I think I had a very small, when I first launched it, a very small SBA loan, but the majority of it was self-funded. When I aligned myself with Disney, the purchase orders started to get larger and larger, and it became more difficult to self-fund it. And that was why I ended up taking on a small loan. But my goal is ultimately to always self-fund it, or to have the revenue kind of feed right back into the business and grow that way. I'm really not someone that believes in having all these extensions.
Okay, great. And Pooja, how about you? I mean, you've got a lot of physical locations. That takes a lot of money. How did you fund that?
Well, it was kind of a mix of everything that everyone has talked about so far. So food businesses are extremely capital intensive, and at the beginning, we were just bootstrapping, and everything that we made went right into the business. It was when we decided to open a brick and mortar in 2018 is when I really needed like a big influx of cash. And so I raised a friends and family round at that point. It was a small round, but it got us through. And honestly, COVID, which is really crazy to say, but like COVID assisted funding kept us afloat during those times. We obviously had to shut down our business. There was no money coming in at all. But that funding really did make sure that we were able to pay our staff, and we survived. And then right now we're in the middle of raising another round. It's an angel round, not VC funding, for more expansion, to be able to open more brick and mortars. Obviously, the goal is to be completely self-sustained, but if growth is always the next step, if we're not satisfied with where we're at, then we will always have to look for funding. And so it's become a part of kind of my daily routine, our DNA, that like we are looking for people who are interested in joining us in this opportunity.
That's great. That's good to hear. I think the other side of the coin of how hard it is to get funding, or how much time it takes, and that it's not as available as you might think, or like Patricia said, you may not want to overindulge in funding, is you got to watch every penny. If no matter who you are, funding is finite, and you want to make it go as far as possible. So Patricia, I'll go back to you. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you manage your cash and how you make every dollar go as far as you can.
We just budget everything. We know when we have positive cash flow coming in. We know when we're shipping product, and we try to. We have a very, very clear business plan. We have projections. We know what's coming in, what's going out. We try to keep it clean. We try not to have extra inventory at the end of the year, so we're paying warehousing fees. When I first started, I didn't realize that, so you order a lot of inventory, not realizing that if you don't sell it, then you have to pay warehousing fees. So I try to, at the end of the year, at the end of a season, try to make it so it's clean. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you'll get a canceled order, but everything's just budgeted. I know really where everything goes and where it comes in.
So just to underline one of the many great things that Patricia just said, that's the example of the kind of thing that you learn when you do things in stages. Like somebody might tell you, but it's very unlikely that you would have started knowing, oh gosh, if I have too much inventory, I'm going to pay warehousing fees. But if you do grow in stages, you learn this stuff, you don't make the same mistake twice. Rianna, tell us a little bit about how you manage your cash and how what do you do financially to make sure you have the money that you need?
Yeah, so QuickBooks is really helpful for us. Also projections and looking at, where our expenses are that month, where our sales are, and seeing, figuring out where can we actually expand. How much, once our bills are taken care of and things are taken care of, how much do we have left over? How much can we expand? What are the amount of stores that we're getting into? What are the new sales orders? What does the projections on the website look like? What events do we have lined up? You kind of, I wouldn't say you understand your business once you're in it, but it gets a little bit easier to grasp the understanding of how much you're making, how much you're gonna make. I mean, it's easier to project once you've started doing that.
Okay, great. And Pooja, tell us a little bit about how you manage your cash.
Well, I think that one of the things that I really benefited from and still benefit from is that my parents are entrepreneurs. And so I've always seen the ups and downs of business. And one of the main pieces of advice, I talk to my dad daily, and one of the main pieces of advice that he has given me from 2015, from when I started, is know your numbers. That he's like, nothing will give you a better picture or a more accurate picture of your business than your actual numbers. It's great to get press and to get social media followers and all of that, and really good feedback on your product. But if the numbers don't support it, the numbers don't support it. And so I have learned from him to do a weekly check on all of my numbers. And a lot of people will say that this is overkill, and I am fully cognizant of that. So no one has to follow this. But I do a weekly reporting on cash flow, on my balance sheet, and my P&L, just to see where we are. And the other big thing for us is that we're a seasonal business. And so 70% of our revenue is earned in just 6 months of the year. And then we have to make it through with a lot of fixed expenses the other parts of the year. And so we need to be fairly accurate with what our projections are and how we're managing cash to make sure that our off season goes properly in the way we want it to.
That's great. And I would just underscore, in all the successful entrepreneurs I've talked to, no matter where they started or what their attitude was towards finance in the beginning, and I understand that a lot of people don't like numbers, feel like it's third grade math and that's scary, or eighth grade math or 12th grade math, but anyhow, every successful entrepreneur I know ended up knowing their numbers. I'm actually, Pooja, going to ask you to repeat a story that you told right before when we were talking before the workshop started about somebody who asked you about spending some money for their startup.
Yeah. So I think that starting a business is very sexy. It's very romanticized, and I think one of the questions I got very recently is, it wasn't a question, but it was more like, I want to start my own business because I don't want to work as much. I want to make sure that I have a better quality of life, and I was just I was blown away that was their goal, and the means to the goal was to start a business. It was baffling to me, because I have ever since I started Malai, there's not a single, obviously you have days off, but there's not a single day off. You have such ownership over this, and only you can move it forward. And I think that that's what makes it really exciting. And I think that that's what makes it so fulfilling. But is it work-life balance? Is it am I working less? Absolutely not. And sometimes it's a matter of survival, and that's stressful, and that's your daily life. And I think that that's something to always keep in mind when and if you're deciding to do this. I think that the journey is a really, really exciting one. And especially if you're super passionate about what you're doing, then it's a really fulfilling one, but it's not an easy one.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I have a bunch of just a time check here for the audience. In about 20 minutes, we're going to go to networking. I can ask these, and I will keep asking questions of our panelists, but I also, if you have questions, they've mentioned a lot of things. They have very different businesses. They're very skillful entrepreneurs. This is your opportunity to ask them things directly. So put questions in the chat. I will try to ask questions that we get from the audience as well. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I guess, let's see, I'll start back with Patricia, but knowing what you know now, what are some things you might have done differently at the beginning or earlier in your business?
Oh, what I would have done differently. One of the things I mentioned in the last comment was I wouldn't have ordered so much inventory in the beginning without knowing where it was going. Now I approach purchase orders completely different. I took returns in the beginning, which right now I do everything possible not to take a return. I will work out any kind of concession with the retailer, because no one makes money on returns. And if there's no skin in the game and they think they can order 20,000 pieces and return 18,000 of them, what good is that? But I didn't know that in the beginning. I was just so happy to have the purchase order and so happy to have people buying my product. I thought, oh my God, but now, all these years later, I approach it much different. So that to me is one of the biggest changes. And I crunch numbers differently. I have distributors approach me all the time, and I'll sit with them and say, let's crunch these numbers now. Let's just go over it very clearly. This is a licensed product now. Let's go over it. What do you want to buy it for? And then what's the margin in there? And but I wouldn't have done that years ago. You have to really live through it to understand how to fight it. You really can't do it. Someone could tell me this years ago, but if you don't live through it, I don't know. Does it stick? I don't know.
No, yeah, unfortunately, no matter how many of these webinars you go to, you're probably going to make some mistakes of your own. Yes. That's just a nature of the beast of starting a business. I will say one thing, echoing on Patricia's comment, one thing that I hear a lot from the entrepreneurs I work with is everybody's planning for excessive growth. What happens if my first shipment sells out? What happens if like there's not enough capacity on my website? If those things happen, that is a good problem. Like plan for the bad problems. So anyhow, I will go to Rianna. Tell us a little bit about some things that you might have done differently if, knowing what you now know.
Yeah, knowing what I now know, I would have gotten out there and sold and focused maybe less on getting an investor, getting a loan. I mean, I can't tell you how much time I spent trying to get an investor, bringing them to the floor, trying to speak to them and show them. Just focus more on the actual business, the things that needed to be done, like making sure the website looked and the copy and everything was just beautiful. Spending more time connecting with actual customers. I did a lot of that, but I could have done more. Also, I would say I didn't raise my prices high enough initially.
Yes, that's true. All right, great. Sorry, I've known Rianna for years. That's why I can comment on her business. But yes, raise price. That I will say generally is, people are afraid of raising prices, and you can't scare away customers, but you'd be surprised. Make sure if you're not making enough money, then you're not really in business. So make sure you're making money. Pooja, what are some things you would do differently, knowing what you now know?
I've been trying to think of an answer while I've been waiting. And honestly, I don't think I would do anything differently. I think that every business is different, and I did what was best for the business at the time. And in order to do things differently, I would have had to have a very different set of circumstances. And so I think it just would have been a completely different situation and a whole new story if I were to change the way I did things. I think that there's always wishes and, hopes that you have for the business, and you hope that you can get there. And that's still the truth. The goalposts just keep moving. But I don't think I would do anything differently.
That's great. That's great to hear. I do want to really underline one thing that Pooja just said, which is at a different time she might have done something different. So starting your business, how you fund it, where you start, how you grow, is not only very particular to you and your skill set and your resources, both financial and otherwise, but also that point in time, what's working for you for the business at that moment. So there's always a lot of moving parts. Let me ask a couple of questions from the chat, and please, if you have more questions, put them back in the chat, because I am monitoring. Brendan has a question. Did you start your business while simultaneously working a full or part-time job, and would you suggest doing that or committing to the new business? Who wants to take that one? Anybody have a? Rianna, you're nodding, so I'm going to call on you.
Yeah, I would suggest, and it's not everyone's situation, so it's hard to give that advice, but I would suggest going full in if you can. But it's always great to have an income source while you're starting a business. I have a great friend in business. She works a full-time tech job while she starts her business. And I see the give off between me, who's straight in the business, and the time and the energy I can give to the business versus her, who can actually give more funding to the business outside of sales. So it's a trade-off, and maybe it's a determination of what you need more of initially.
Either of you have a different answer, Patricia or Pooja?
Well, it's hard to tell someone, not to have a job when you're starting a business because you need capital. Mm-hmm. So, I would never tell someone to leave their job unless maybe they're capitalized, maybe they have a substantial savings. Every situation would be different. But, I would say keep some kind of funding coming in while you're beginning and to see if you like it. A lot of people want to open a business, but they don't realize, are they going to like this business? They just kind of have an idea, like a vague idea, and they don't realize that maybe that's not something they're really going to be good at, they're going to like. So that's what it might be.
Again, I think it's very particular to you and your circumstances. I've seen people successful with both sides. Here's another question. Lativa, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, says, they say slow and steady wins the race. but in business, slow and steady may put you out of business. How do you plan right at the beginning of a startup to stay afloat until you're making enough profit or until you can pay yourself? I'll turn that to Pooja because
I mean, you can't. You just like you can't. You can plan for certain things, like getting as much information as possible from your customers. Doing product development, just testing out different prices, and you can make projections, right? Based on all of that information that you gather, you can make projections on when you will be profitable, or when you will need to raise money, or when you need a loan, whatever it might be. You can make projections based on that. But I have always said that like we are one of the slowest growing businesses out there. Like I think that a lot of people from the outside are like, oh my goodness, you're everywhere. It's like, well, I started in 2015, right? Like I started nearly a decade ago, and this hasn't been 1 to 100 journey, and those businesses that you do hear that are like that are the exception. That the majority of businesses do grow slowly. And so to kind of piggyback on the previous question, if that means that like you're still working full time and you're doing this on the weekends, right? If this means that you're just doing, you're dabbling in it, you're not ready to commit full time, do it that way. Gather information, and then when you're ready, dive in feet first. But a slow growing business, usually the success stories have been slow growing businesses, and so I'm not one to talk about a fast growing business.
I mean, I think, like you said, to outsiders, yours looks quite fit, like it's certainly grown significantly. But I think that's just a general comment I would make is, what it feels like inside a business and what it looks like from the outside is often very different. And so again, when you going back to this idea of the mythology of the business, you hear about these things in retrospect. You hear about the success stories. You hear about what worked. You don't hear about the 12 stumbles that got you to this great looking present. So those things are going to happen to you, and they happen to everybody. So like keep that in mind. Rosemary says, and this is for anybody who wants to answer it, do you have any recommended tools or templates for financial planning and strategy? Anybody want to take what you do in your business for either financial planning or business strategy? Don't all jump up at once. Patricia, I'm going to pick on you.
Say it again so I can think about
Do you have any recommendations for tools or templates for either financial planning or business strategy?
Well, it's funny. I keep a spreadsheet. I keep an Excel spreadsheet, and I crunch numbers on a weekly basis. I am always crunching numbers, and I have separate tabs, and I have tabs of what's shipping out and the amount of money shipping out and what's coming in and what receivables are owed and what months they're owed on. So I always kind of have an idea, okay, in February, I'll make up something. These receivables are coming in March, these receivables, and that helps me budget. Because I know, okay, in March, this is coming in, or in April, this is coming in, or this is going out. So I keep spreadsheets, and I have a Mac computer, and I have numbers, and on the top tab, I must have 20 tabs, and I keep a tab even for pricing. Someone had asked a question, how do you know what to charge, what MSRP? And that is a very, very important part of a business, to figure out what price to charge for your product. And, even every time we create a product, even with Disney, what goes into deciding what is going to be the MSRP on this? How are we going to come up with the price? And then we do comps, and we go into the marketplace and we say, okay, so-and-so selling this for this, and so-and-so, what's in this, and what are the components? What is the best price for it that's going to give it a turnover? Because you can charge $50 for something, but if no one's going to buy it, what good is it? And then you back in from that, and you find out, okay, this is the best price, $19.99. Okay, now a buyer is only going to pay half of that. So $9.99 is your sweet spot. Okay, now that's what you have to work with. Okay, out of that, you've got to take, what is my cost? What is my shipping? You keep going down the line. And I do that on a daily basis so finding out an MSRP is a very important part of any business.
Great. Does anybody else have any recommendations of tools that you use?
I would say Google. Honestly, I Google my competitors, I go on their sites, I look at what they're doing. A lot of the time, it's been inspiration, but also understanding what their customers are saying. If you look at their comments and, more established businesses and understanding what customers are looking for around this type of product, that's a really great way to get into strategic thinking about where you want your business to go.
Okay, great. I'll stick with you, Rianna, because there was a question from Sabrina specifically for you, because you mentioned it. How did you find the right price for your product?
Well, it's that 50% is usually, what a retailer wants. Some want a little bit higher, some want a little bit lower. Not that many want lower, but I would say I looked at what my competitors were selling for, and I spoke to retailers, and I got real gummy with some of my retailers, and I got to see some of their sales sheets. You could even call up a competitor and say, hey, I'm a retailer, I'm looking to wholesale, can you send me your price list? And then you could really see what things are selling for, and you can also kind of edge out how. So I add this beneficial ingredient that's pretty expensive, perception wise. What would I add to that? Maybe $1, or maybe, they have this, and it's, so you can deduce that on your own and then take it out there and speak to people that want to buy it.
That's great. That's great. I'm going to switch gears a bit. Somebody had asked, and I guess I'll turn this to you, Pooja. What's the best way to sell a handmade product? You mentioned that initially yours was a handmade product. So, you mentioned the food carts, but do you have any suggestions? We don't know what kind of product this is.
Yeah, I'm assuming that it's probably not food. So obviously my thoughts on this is very specific to food, but I think with food or anything handmade, the best way is to figure out how to connect with your customers, because it's a product that's so personal to you and likely has a story behind it. Your customers will want to know it, and that's part of the brand. And so in whatever way you sell, I would just make sure that personal aspect is a part of it. And so for us, it was through fairs and markets. It was like a way for us to constantly talk to our customers and to get that feedback. And then eventually it was a brick and mortar. But there are avenues like that which have more direct connection.
Okay, great. Rianna, I'm going to take another question for you, which is, you mentioned when you talked about how your company has grown, first that you found this well-flown, and also that you got a grant, that you won a pitch contest. So you've been very creative in finding funding. How do you track this stuff? What are some tools that you use to find out when there are opportunities like this?
Yeah, so there are newsletters you can sign up for. Google. I kind of just search for what's out there, and then there are groups that you can join on Instagram that have the 15 for 15% pledge. I really like them, and just staying connected and having your ear to the ground.
Okay, great. I do recommend, one thing I always recommend to people is sign up for a lot of newsletters. Especially when you're getting started. Anything that's remotely related to your business, your customers, whatever, you can always cancel them. Your neighborhood, your, kind of, if you're whatever from a particular ethnic group or whatever, then anything that you can join that has some pertinence to you, because you will hear about various opportunities. Actually, Cynthia just asked, can you share your favorite newsletters? Rianna, you were just talking, I don't know what the 15% club is. Maybe you want to talk about what's that?
Yeah, 15% pledge.
Oh, sorry.
Pledging to make sure funding goes to 15% of entrepreneurs, which are often women and women of color. And then also Entrepreneurial League, DTC, which is direct to consumer newsletter. They have really great entrepreneurial just motivations, and then the newsletter has really great info about what different companies are using, different platforms, different marketing strategies. So DTC is really great.
Okay, awesome. Patricia, Pooja, are there any newsletters or resources that you use just to stay on top of anything? It doesn't have to be funding. Information that's helpful as an entrepreneur?
I always go on the SBA website. I'm always looking at reading what I can there. No other one in particular that I can think of right now.
Okay, great. Pooja, is there anything?
Honestly, I mostly there's not like newsletters or podcasts. Like obviously there's like the usual suspects that like I keep in touch with as well. But I think more than anything, the best resources for me are fellow entrepreneurs. So any networking groups, any Facebook groups, any Slack channels, things like that you could be a part of. I always throw in questions there and get a much more realistic answer than anything that I've researched online, and get a sympathetic ear at the same time. So I try to stay connected to fellow entrepreneurs.
Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to make one comment. The one thing that I tell entrepreneurs to do, and I know this sounds petty, but watch Shark Tank, because you learn a lot about what entrepreneurs are doing, and you also learn about from the investors what they're looking for, and you can also see entrepreneurs that are failing and why they're failing. But I always tell entrepreneurs, watch Shark Tank. There's a reason for that. It's entrepreneurs putting their lives on the line to see if they can get an investment in what they know about their business, and they basically explain what they're going through, so you can see it. I find it very informative, but maybe not other people, but I find it informative.
I think anywhere that you can, learn, see other entrepreneurs. I love Pooja's advice too. I often, starting a business is hard. It's lonely. There's only a certain amount that your spouse wants to hear about it. So finding other entrepreneurs who will give you the straight scoop, as Pooja said, is really, really important. We're coming to the end of our time. I have one question. I have one great final question from the chat. But just in general, we've covered a lot about the challenges of starting a business. Is there anything else that you would recommend that people do that you haven't said already? Let's see, Pooja, I'll go back to you.
I mean, no. If you're ready to do this, you're ready to do this. I think the only piece of advice that I would give to anyone at any stage is to remember to run your own race. Stop comparing yourself to others. Stop comparing yourself to the unicorns. All of that is just noise, and it's going to take longer for you to get to where you want to get to. So keep your goals in mind. The track is in front of you. Run your own race.
That's great. I like that.
Okay. Now, by commenting, you're up now, Patricia. What would you add?
I like that comment. That's basically sums it up. Run your own race. Just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean that you should be doing it at the same speed or at the same level. Just be positive, and like she said, try to keep all the noise out, because there's so much noise.
That is just such great advice. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs who are like, but why did this happen to this company? And you never know. Rianna, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I love the run your own race. But also I like to look at my competitors that are doing really a lot better than me and figure out how I can do something similar, or, kind of come up to that level. If the marketing strategy looks like this, they've done the work for you. They've done the research. They've, paid someone probably thousands of dollars to conduct that research. That's free for you now. So I think that's really important. But back to, you mentioned podcasts, Pooja. So a podcast I really like, Diary of a CEO. It's a great podcast. Always really great CEOs on there. And then Startup CPG, if you have a consumer packaged goods product, they have a lot of resources just across the board. To join is free.
This is great. You guys have been awesome at sharing ideas, resources. We could ask you questions all day. Kenya had one great question. There were many great questions, and just one aside, some people had questions that were for one specific panelist or very specific to your business. If you have a question for the panelists, you have their contact information. I urge you to reach out. If you have specific questions, check back with SCORE or somebody else. It might not be that we can get your question answered. But for all of the panelists, Kenya asked, would any of the panelists trade their entrepreneurial life for a corporate job again? So in other words, if you had to go do it all over again, would you still have your own business? Rianna, I'll start with you because you were...
No. No, not a chance.
All right, Patricia?
Would I go to a corporate job over getting,
Yeah.
is that, no, I would not go to, I enjoy what I'm doing.
Okay, Pooja, how about you?
I never had a corporate job, to be fair, but I love what I'm doing. It depends on the day. There are some really hard days, but at the end, this is so worth it.
All right, awesome. So I can't think of a better note to end on. Despite all the hard work that you've heard about, all the challenges, all of these people are really happy with what they're doing, and you can see the success of their businesses, and that could be you too. And so that is the end of our time, and I will turn it over to Mary, who's going to let you now network and talk to other entrepreneurs. And thank you to our wonderful panel.